Good morning. Welcome to Saturday Morning Coffee. My name's Lance McKenna, and as always, I'm here with Tiffany Linderman. How are you, Tiffany?
Hey Lance, I'm doing great. It is extremely hot outside today, and I'm pretty sure I stole your thunder there. How are you making it through?
Well, as always, I'm still enjoying my Fifth Acres coffee from Good Brothers Cafe from Midtown Harrisburg. So I'm enjoying that this morning. However, I have changed over to the cold version and added some ice into it. But outside of that, I think it's going to be a day inside and a Netflix and relax day today. So but I am grateful and thankful for this Saturday morning uh, to be here. We have a really special opportunity to do. We're doing something special today, right? Is that what you told me? You have something. You have
Absolutely.
something planned. We're doing something different today.
We have something planned. Absolutely. I know you're going to talk about it, but we have an awesome crossover podcast. And what are you going to say there, Lance?
What? We have a crossover podcast today? How is that possible? We're podcasting with another podcast today.
Oh, it's going to be epic, right?
I think so. I think so. So who is it?
So we have Arnav Roy. He is a podcaster of the Grateful Living podcast, and he is doing so many inspirational things, but he's making sure to understand and help bring to light around different racial injustices and interviewing people of different walks of life to help bring them forward and share the amazing stories that they're bringing. So hopefully I did a little bit of justice introducing you, but good morning, Arnav.
Good
Yeah.
morning, Arnav. How are you doing?
Good morning, guys. Thank you, Lance, and
Good.
thank you, Tiffany, for having
For,
me.
for the Grateful Living podcast out of Boston. Welcome
Thank
and
you.
to this beautiful Saturday morning. And is it hot there as well?
It is. It's 90 degrees. It is.
Yeah, so that is absolutely awesome that you were able to do this special podcast. Um, if you want to just jump in, tell a little bit about yourselves, and we can kind of go ourselves, and we can just dive into the conversation.
Yeah. So, my name is Arnav Roy, and I guess basically to introduce myself, I've dealt with mental health issues since I was probably 13. Um, Depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts, and things of that nature. Um, I think, my junior year of college, a person from my high school that she was a year below me. Um, so she at that time was a sophomore in college. Um, she died by suicide, and um, you know, it it changed my life at that point. At that point, I didn't have the maturity um, of knowledge and things of that nature, but I can remember, you know, that weekend, going to her funeral and stuff like that, and just really feeling for her because, um, throughout life I had similar thoughts. And so fast forward to March of 29, that was January of 2016. And then March of 2019, um, Meg, January of 2016, she was someone that was, I had a lot of mutual friends with. She had dated two friends of mine throughout her time in middle and high school. So we had a lot of overlap, but I wouldn't say we were like friends. But in March of 2019, I lost a friend, Pat, who was, I would call a true friend. Um, he was 2 years younger than me. So we spent 2 years in college together. Um, and that obviously really changed my life. Um, you know, you go through so many different thoughts. in terms of just looking back on your relationship with them, thinking about discussions and things of that nature. And my biggest regret there is one of the interesting things. I'm a big person into believing in the positive and the blessings, and um, I had the knowledge of dealing with mental health issues, but I never had conversations with Pat about that stuff. And that's one of my biggest, deepest regrets because, for my other close friends who lost him, but didn't deal with that type of mental health issue, they don't have to deal with that level of guilt. But, everybody's journey is different. But Pat and I, in terms of at least asking those questions of whether life is worth it or whether it's worth it to continue, had that level of common understanding. And there's a lot of regret there for me. There's a lot of regret there because I never had those conversations. Now, the backdrop where I've in the couple years it's since it's been happened, um, where I forgive myself is, the mental health wasn't talked about, and especially as a male in society, showing off feelings and things of that nature is not what we did in Pat and I were really close friends 2015 to 2017 when we overlapped in college, and then you know um, after I graduated in 17, we still saw each other maybe, twice a year. But obviously, like, as it happens in adult life, you have to, you get tighter with time and with responsibilities. So you're not able to see everybody and things of that nature. Um, but I guess the main thing that I look back on that time period, the reason I never had those conversations was you were seen as soft, or you were seen as crazy, or you were seen as these things. And, um, for me at that point, I said to myself, um, I have to do something because I do have this knowledge, and again, it's not necessarily a good knowledge to know what it's like to be suicidal or to have suicidal ideations. But as someone that's living and breathing that hasn't done it, I do have a level of knowledge that a friend that just hasn't dealt with mental health issues doesn't have, right? And so that's where you have to look at the blessings of what you've been given. And so, I was thinking throughout the time, what can I do? And um, August of 2019, I just kind of wrote a Facebook post like saying, if anyone's dealing with anything, I'm always here. That was kind of to my community. And then, long story short, basically March like basically I gave myself a year. I'm gonna do something. There's no way I'm gonna just, because I kind of saw what happened with Meg in January of 16, which is people are very, we're doing walks, we're very like big on advocacy that year, right? So like we did a really good job from 16 to 17 of like, mental health walks, fundraisers, things of that nature. And then after 17, and I hate to say it, but like people just move on. Life moves on. We have our own problems, and there's no fault in anybody, but those conversations stopped after 17. There were no more walks and things of that nature. And so having that background, I said within a year I'm going to do something. And so March of 20, I just started I got on my iPhone, started an audio podcast of, I'm going to just, again, I'll just speak about what I know with mental health. I'll speak to my like my personal like Facebook friends or whoever. Um, and, that's where the journey began. And, since then, I've learned it's very powerful to interview people and give their perspective. Obviously, I don't know everything. I don't know what it's like growing up as an African American. I don't know what it's like being a mother. I don't know what it's like being gay or whatever it is that you want to talk about. Um, I just have my perspective. And so that's when I started interviewing people. And, it's been my way to keep Pat's spirit alive. And Pat's very much integrated in everything that we do. And, in the midst of that, starting that, actually July of 2020, we lost another high school friend of mine. So, the commitment to it became a lot clearer. Suicide's the number 2 killer for 10 to 34-year-olds. And that's CDC data. So, there's definitely a problem in society. And the interesting thing about, mental health and suicide is it's preventable. And so, the way I look at it is, if you can think negatively, your thoughts, you can also think positively, right? It's a it's a mindset change. And in that gray area, how do we create that, right?
Yeah.
So that's how it started. I know that was very long, but
No, that wasn't very,
that,
that wasn't long at all.
yeah.
That was a great introduction to it, and that's why I was so excited about this. Like you and I have talked many times, and we're looking at a podcast, a crossover of 3 different generations. Not saying who's the oldest or the youngest, but we're looking at 3 different backgrounds, and I too struggle with anxiety. I too have lost a friend uh, to to suicide, um, which was very tragic. In my generation, um, it wasn't talked about. Mental health, there was no talk of, hey, go to therapy. Get help. So for me, doing the podcast now, it's a journey about making a difference in somebody's life. We both have various different guests on our show, but it's always that theme of, like, we always mention that somebody's always carrying an invisible backpack. We don't know the burdens that other people have, and you'll hear me say a lot of times is make a difference in somebody's life today and every day. And I just picked up the phone and just kind of said, I'm available 24/7. I know the struggles that I personally go through with anxiety. I know that at my age, we didn't talk about So I went to go see a therapist, and I can say that now proudly.
Yeah.
I went to go see somebody because I didn't want to feel the way I was feeling, and I didn't understand it. The as much as we use our brains, there's so much that we don't know about. And it's like, why do I feel this way? Why is this happening to me? Why do I feel frozen? Why do I feel stuck? And for me, the triggering points was like when my friend took their life, and God bless her. Um, we were close. We've known her for 20 years. Got a phone call at 2 o'clock in the morning, and I actually happened to be out of state. But I always said that, if you call me, I'm going to be available. So I, picked up the telephone, had a conversation, and I was like, if I wouldn't, and then this is one of my regrets, is like I was out of state doing something, and I was like, had I been back in state, um, how would this turn out? So I wake up the next morning, and literally it was probably about 6 hours in between. I get a phone call, and my friend had took their life, and I was the last person that they spoke to, and I was like, wow, And I say to myself, like like, had I been there, maybe that was a way of saying goodbye. Um, but it's mental health is, something that we all need to talk about. The anxiety. And like I said, being an African American, um, I think we need to have more discussions. I mean, not everybody's coming from a rich family, a poor family. You look. We talked about Leslie Wyron, and Leslie's Hope. Who's doing an absolutely phenomenal job. Whose son Austin and his best friend, college football players. But I think having this crossover podcast is really important because we're saying, look at us, three different generations, three different backgrounds, and we all have stories that are the same that connects us. And what triggered us starting off Saturday morning coffee was, my father passing away, and my father was just my biggest hero. And no matter what he said in life, he says, Lance, you know what, be the best version you can be. Treat the janitor the way you CEO. But you're never better than anybody else. Always be humble. Never walk past anybody without saying hello or acknowledging them. And when you're young, you don't really think about that. But look what's going on in the world today. You saying hello to somebody might be that hello that they need to stay alive one more day. We don't know that, and you had mentioned the fact of, yes, we're all in the hustle bustle. And since 2020, I mean, who's not carrying extra baggage? You look at the economy, you look at the job markets, you look at the inflation, you look at all the things that are going on in the news. You look at things going on in the world. What better time to say, hey, we need more talk about mental health with ourselves and with our friends, and to be okay with it. It's not taboo.
Yeah.
It's not taboo to bring it up.
Yeah.
And you and I had a conversation the other day about talking to a friend of, about being honest with somebody. And it's like we have to recognize the things that are in ourselves and try to help ourselves. But we also have to be able to recognize, hey, I'm going to call you up. I'm not going to text you. I'm going to call you, and that I'm a big advocate of calling and not texting. I don't text well, but no, but I'm like, I want to hear your voice, you know. And I did that with a friend of mine. It was really close, and I, you know, heard his voice, and I didn't like the sound of it. And I turned around the next day. I was on a plane, and I was like, "What's going on? Let's talk." You know what I mean? I'm like, I don't know where he was at completely, but I knew in the conversation, like, I need to be on a plane tomorrow and talk. And, but that was like something that's happened within the last 5 years. But like you said, it's been so taboo to talk about mental health, talk about therapy, um, and helping one another, and it's important because nobody wants to go see that, and they have that regret of, yeah, I should have said this. I saw this sign, but I didn't say anything, and I don't want to do that. And so that's what Saturday morning coffee is all about, as your podcast is, we're three individuals who are working in God's kingdom, and we're just trying to make a difference. The people out there who are doing everything that are not millionaires or anything else, just average people that are making a difference in people's lives and saving people's lives through many different aspects. And I know that I've talked a lot, but I'd love to hear Tiffany's perspective.
Yeah, if you don't mind me sharing a little bit, I'll just, as Lance even touched on, my personal mental health issue is anxiety. I know Yeah, I would say that the world in the last couple of years have definitely spiked it higher than it probably has ever been in my life. Now, that might not be exactly true, but in the past, when I've gone through this, I have absolutely gone to my doctor. I've gone to a therapist as well to work through those issues. And I'm so thankful that nowadays we have that a lot more of an open forum. I know it's easier as a woman. I think it's a lot easier to talk about it than probably as a man. But I'm fortunate and happy that, you know, the world is opening up on sharing that. And I will say, you know, one of the things, you know, in my type of role and my leadership role, I used to always look up to, you know, my leaders, and I'm like, oh, you know, they have it great. Like they, nothing phases them. They seem always so strong. And one of the things that I've really been trying to be very intentional about, I've actually had people come, you know, up to me and ask like those questions, you know, hey, have you ever had anxiety? And I'm like, hey, I'm an open book. If you want to ask a question, by all means, I'll share with you. This is what I've experienced, and these are the things I've had to do for myself to work through it. And obviously, you know, please share what you're feeling, because I know if you're feeling this way right now, you know, you may need a listening ear or somebody to lean on during it. And so anyways, that's my personal story around that. But from a suicide perspective, I have known people very close to me that have had those thoughts. Super scary because they are people very near and dear to my heart and I love very much. From my high school experience, there was a young, lovely woman who did take her life. And there's times that I think about her from you know, day to day. I go into, I know where, what happened. And I, you know, it makes me feel as though I was there when she made that choice. And I know when you say that you make that choice, I don't want to make it sound like it's somebody really choosing, but it's really, I can't even imagine that feeling in that moment to feel like that's the only option. And so my heart goes out to anybody who's ever felt that way. And just to you, Arnav, I wanted to say that I can see actually both you and Lance that you're super empathetic individuals, because it seems like you guys are carrying a weight on your shoulders, despite the fact that there, in my mind, I'm going to tell both of you that I absolutely think you should not feel and take away a guilt in the situation, but I recognize you wish there's some more you could have done. And I think you're absolutely doing that today and helping to spread awareness and help others. And it's an amazing story that you guys are able to take forward.
Yeah, no, I mean that's a great point in terms of you know, survivor's guilt, which is you have to control what you can control. So for Lance, for example, you know, his geographic location wasn't something that he could control, and it wasn't in his power to be in state. So that's not something that he can look back on and say, I should feel regretful for, because that's not something he had direct control over. You know, for me, it's the same way in terms of, you know, the society I grew up in. Men weren't talking about mental health, and it wasn't even being introduced. And the first time I heard the term, I was 21. You know, so in that same way, and um, you know, I think we all have to, you know, I think over the years, definitely, I've done a better job with guilt. And I think that goes to the second point, which is, you know, it's not a friend's job to keep someone alive. That's an unhealthy expectation. You know, I really, um, you know, love that these stories of, you know, people going to a bridge and stopping someone, or Lance, you know, the next day taking an air flight. But that's really, it shows you how bad a place we are in society, that we have to go to these extremes, you know. And I think, you know, Leslie talks about this a lot, in terms of creating wellness from an early age, to a point where we do have a system where someone knows, you know, if I'm feeling anxious, I can either go to a therapist, a guidance counselor, do, you know, whatever. Because we don't want to be at a place in society where we need to rely on someone like Lance to make that call, to spend a lot of money on a flight. And, we just don't want people to be in that spot. We want them to be good, you know, throughout their life and know what the healthy way to deal with things are.
Yeah, and that's a really good point too, because like I said, I too, have to deal with my own invisible backpack, and that is something that I've worked over the years, and found different methods, to be able to help. Because, like you said, I think you said it's not the friend's burden. You know, that I love that term. It's not your burden because we have our own burdens that we're dealing with, but it's still something that it's okay to talk about, like an open forum, open table, like, hey man, what do you know? Like I've heard about this new program. I've heard about that, and like you said, it's more important that we are bringing up mental health, because it's such a key component to life right now. And I don't know anybody personally that might not be going through it. There's people going through it and don't even recognize it, which is just scary. So maybe this podcast, somebody will hear it and be like, wow, that happened to me, and I just saw Arnav and Tiffany and Lance just talk about, they just all admitted their stories, true life stories. There's nothing fictional here. This is three individuals that three different geographical locations, similar stories, and they went and did something, you know, and that's what I really hope, that something comes out of this. That we affect one person. We did our job, working in the kingdom, and that's just truly um, what I hope for. And Tiffany, you brought up a great question. I wanted to ask you is, why do you feel that it's easier for women to talk about it versus men?
I'm smiling because I don't know if this is the right answer. I
No, well,
feel like women
there's no
talk a
wrong
lot
there's no
more, but
wrong answer. There's no wrong answer.
no, I know. I'm just laughing because I'm like, women just talk a lot more. I think that we share our feelings, and I think I feel like we've talked about this on other podcasts. Men, you're taught to, hey, suck it up, and just kind of go forward, and so when you're not taught, like Arnav just said that from a young age, that it is okay to talk about these things, and fostering that environment that, hey, I want to hear you, like what is going on with you, like I feel like men are not taught that, boys are not taught that. And I'm saying that as like a generalization, but I know that there are families that do that. And then from a girl perspective, we're there we're I feel like been given a lot more space to be able to share our feelings as we grow up. It's more, it was just always socially acceptable, and so hopefully this is the time where this is starting to shift and change for the future, for our men and our boys, to grow up in the world, to be able to be in a safe space to do that. Because the other thing too, I mean, I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but maybe it's just TVs, watching TV. It's like men always get heckled for when they want to share something, if they're being like a baby. And I hate to say it that way, but that's what you see on TV. So whether that is reality, I can't speak to that, but that's what I'm seeing on TV. So that is the impression that is being shared with our younger generation, or men on TV. So these are the forums that at least, hopefully we can start to break that mold.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely true. And like I said, we mentioned earlier, three different generations. I think the younger generation is talking about it a lot more versus my generation. I think my generation is talking about it now, and is it too late? I hope not, you know. But like I said, I'm starting to see more men. African American men or just men in general, that I know some good kings out there that are saying, "Hey, it's okay to go to therapy. It's okay. It's okay. You're not crazy." I mean, I hate to label it that way. I think we said that earlier. It was taboo to say, "Hey, I feel strange. I got something. I don't feel right." I encourage people to go to therapy. I'm not, you know what I mean? I do counseling, but there's only certain things that are in my scope that I can control. But there's always somebody out there that's willing to help you. That's always going to be better than you, and and I think talking about it more and just saying, and it's really a generational shift, and I think Leslie brought this up, is that the suicide rate now is just out of control. And we're seeing kids that are all the way down. And I'm going to bring up bullying,
Mhm.
uh, peer pressure, um, gender, and I think Leslie has said it, and don't quote me on this, but I think she said the youngest was an 8-year-old that took his life. Um, and I was kind of blown away by that. I'm like, eight? And it was like, what pressures does an 8-year-old have? You know what I mean? The anxiety, but it's increasing lower. And like I said, I'm bringing up the bullying aspect of it. My generation didn't have social media. Now maybe you guys can add something more into it because you guys are younger than me. But how does social media play a part in this and make a difference?
I mean, I think social media is huge in terms of, I think a lot of people don't realize the relationship mentally you have to have with it, right? So when you go on social media, you're only going to see positive things, people showing their best self, right? Um, for younger folks, maybe, your best friend getting engaged or um, getting into a college or getting a job or getting married or whatever, like, on vacation, whatever it may be, it's going to be the most positive thing that you can see of them. And right, people don't go on social media to talk about, hey, I had a bad day, or hey, I just got laid off, or you know, the I had a tough couple hours feeling sad. Um, and so I think that relationship of understanding that what you're going to see doesn't represent human life is important, and it's something that I think a lot of people, it takes time for them to make that realization. And um, if you get into the comparison game there, um, you're going to feel depressed, right? If you're just um, in your bedroom and had a regular school day, and you see all these people on vacation, or celebrating this level of success or whatever it is, that is going to depress. Like, you're going to compare, be like, what am I doing with my life? And the important thing that you have to, if you're in that situation, is realize you aren't going to see the negative, you aren't going to see the realities. And so I think having, you know taking social media with a grain of salt of what you're seeing from your friends and family that you follow, and not directly equating social media as a representation of real life, is very important.
I just have a really quick example. Like, as you just explained that, I think that's very true. I actually had a similar conversation with my daughter, unrelated to social media, but comparisons to other people. And I'm like, I had to explain to her that life is not you're not always seeing all the things. And if you can't always compare yourselves to others, you have to learn and find inside yourself that what you're proud of, your strengths that you bring to the table. But my other thing that I want to relate is that it's funny how you say about social media. I actually, my best friend, she'll post these things on Facebook and like everything looks amazing and glorious and I'm happy for her. And then it's funny when I go and have a conversation with her, I find out all the things that aren't great. And I'm like, oh, wow, I thought you were doing really well. Like I thought everything was great. And then to find out, oh, okay, there's another side of the story that I'm not seeing because you're just posting all this stuff on Facebook. So I think even too, kind of as Lance was saying, having conversations with people is important too, so that you understand what's really going on in their lives versus us just relying on what we're being shown on social media. So I think it's a good call out.
Yeah, and another thing too that I look for is we live in a world of likes. Uh, and that's what everybody's bound their head, and social media, unfortunately, we live in a world of likes and selfies. And, and I've heard stories where, people are so self-conscious about themselves, So when I see something like on social media, and I know that it's happening a lot, is that, people are throwing a lot of selfies. And if they don't get a certain amount of likes, it's like, oh, what's wrong with me? But well, do I not look okay? I mean, uh, and to me, that's a sign of, and maybe not to everybody. I'm not going to include everybody into that. But like, if somebody's doing a lot of selfies and looking for those likes, and maybe your friends should reach out to you, pick up the phone, and call, because self image is another thing that our society is really drawn to, is, am I too thin? Am I too fat? I mean, am I Victoria's Secret, or am I athletic shape? Obesity. There's so many different realms of it, and I just don't know. I just want to say that, anybody out there that is feeling that way on social media, I mean, there's outlets. There's reach out to somebody. The new number now is 899. Again, 899. If you want to talk to somebody, regardless if it's mental health or if it's suicide, that's pretty simple. Three numbers, 899, and there's just so much. And I really hope.
I think it's 988.
988.
Yeah.
988. I'm glad you corrected me.
Yeah.
That's why we do the crossover. You know what? I mean, that's the younger generation correcting. And so thank you for correcting me on that. So it's, what it is again?
988.
988. 988. All right. So 988. Three numbers. That's where you call to make sure that, if anything is personally wrong, that you can call in the 11th hour. Like I said, one of the biggest things about mental health, and I think we've all experienced this with our own anxieties, and you guys can attest to that. It's great during the day, that when you're busy. It's when that 11th hour comes and you're by yourself. That's when the anxiety hits. You know, I mean, I can get you
Mine
guys.
comes all the time, so mine's just the 11th hour. But yeah, I mean, I think I get what you're saying for sure.
Would you agree, Arnav? I mean, that's the time.
Yeah,
I mean, not the time for me, but just in general. Like when you're busy during the day, are you thinking about it, or just when you're alone, or what's your aspects on that?
I think each person's journey is different, and it depends on so many different factors. Obviously, work or school can be a distraction from what you're going through, and then when those things are done and you come home, then you start dealing with the things on your mind. So that definitely makes sense. um and I think this kind of goes back to what Tiffany was talking about earlier, in terms of men not having as many conversations. But that's an important point to say that, um, just because you don't talk about it doesn't mean it doesn't affect you, right? So, um, when she was saying her things, I was thinking about, I have a decent number of girlfriends and I have a decent number of guy friends, and back in the day, like, if one of our friends went on like a date or something like that, it's, oh, how'd the date go? Oh, it went well. You think there'll be a second one? Yeah. And then we move on to talk about sports, right? And then if you compare that, and again, this is again generalization, but if you compare that with how girls talk about it, it's, oh, did he open the door for you? What did you guys talk about during your conversation? Did you feel good? Do you think you did he text back for a second? Like, there's so much more follow up in terms of the conversation. And the thing is, the guy is thinking all those questions himself. We're all, obviously there's a spectrum of anxiety and things of that nature, but the guy is thinking about it and he's wondering about it, but he's just having to do all that thinking and decision making by himself because he doesn't have the support network to be like, okay, she did this. Let me get my feedback from my friends on what they think about that or how I should approach this. And I think that's a wonderful thing that women do. And it's again generalization, but it's funny with a lot of my female friends. They'll say there's no secrets between us. We know everything about everything in terms of our boyfriends or whatever who we're dating. And I mean, say what you want to say about that. Maybe certain things should be, but that's much better way than to know really nothing about how your friend's date went, other than it went good and he's doing a second one. That is just not the way to handle it. So I would encourage all the men. All it takes, and I think Lance has talked about this, but all it takes is putting your bootstraps up and being that change, right? You can create that change within your friend group. You can start that. One of the things that's interesting from losing several friends to suicide, now my friends and I ask each other, how's your mental health? We never asked that question prior to losing our friends to suicide. Obviously it's a terrible thing or way that's come about in our life, but as soon as we made that change, it then never became, you know weird that someone brought it up, in a later meetup. It's now very normal for us, and you can create that change. It just requires you being that change.
Yeah, and I want to add on to that. For men, I always call it the barbecue sauce conversation. When I say that is, and it's just kind of a funny way of saying, because when guys get together, we have a surfacey conversation, and Tiffany, you know me very well, and Arnav, you do as well too. Is that I want to know everything about what's going on in your life. I don't want to just have a barbecue sauce conversation with you, like when I'm standing in the backyard talking with you, or if I'm picking up the telephone. I want to know what's going on. And I did start making that change. It's okay to talk about that. Like, so I challenge men. Like, I'm here today. I'm challenging men to not have barbecue sauce conversations. When I say that, I mean surfacey conversations. And as Arnav says, his group of friends are checking on themselves, or they're saying, "How's your mental health?" And this is a personal challenge to the world, to all men and to women, that are struggling. And I'm okay putting it out there, and because I want to be, I want to make a difference. I as Arnav does, as Tiffany does, we all want to make a difference. And that's why I think this is really important. This conversation is so strong and so deep, because I think it's important that the world sees this.
And I think the caveat here is it doesn't need to be the whole conversation, right? So if before you maybe 10% was how are you doing, how's your job, and 90% was debating sports and politics and things of that nature and what's going on in society, all it needs to, you can just dial that to, maybe from that 10, it's 40% of the conversation is checking in on the person, and then the other 60 is still debating sports, politics, things of that nature. It's just including that aspect to be a prominent part. There were times when I'd go to a social event and the entire time we debated sports or politics, I had no idea. I didn't catch up at all with the person that I had no idea how they were doing, because the entire time we were just going through, debating, things in society.
Yeah. And like I said, and men should have more. I know this, Tiffany. This is one of the things I admire about women, is that they have lunch dates. Women they're like, oh, I'm having lunch with my girlfriend. I'm not having a girls' night out. You know what I mean? Painting brush or whatever women do. I admired that. Like that's like a great thing because like you said, women talk to other women. And it's like, and I try to remember when was the last time I had a lunch date with a buddy. Like just called up and scheduled. Hey, let's go to lunch. I mean, outside of doing business, uh, we don't do that. And I think that's we should start doing that more. I noticed that people are gonna be like, that's crazy, but it's not. It's not, but because we have to, it's got to change. It has to change, and so I'm okay with saying it. And then I just wanted to really just put that out there. That's one of the ways women probably communicate a lot better than men do. And what do you have to say, Tiffany? I know you.
No, I wanted to say that as a woman who has friends that I can share details or other women, maybe some men that I feel like I can talk to and share and get feedback, it is hugely helpful. It's immensely helpful. I cannot actually, Arnav, as you were talking and sharing the examples of like a guy going on a date versus the girl going on a date, I'm like, I cannot even imagine. Like you made me think, I can't even imagine having my life where I didn't have people to like share those details with, get feedback from to help me be able to make better decisions. I'm not saying that people don't make good decisions, making decisions on their own, but still like having feedback, if you have good friends to get feedback from, it can be immensely huge. I feel like that was so instrumental to help me to get through life and to be where I am today. And so I will say as a person who's lived it and had the opportunity to share and have people in my corner, I think it's extremely important. Like Arnav talked about, maybe you turn up the dial by 10%, whatever you're comfortable with. It doesn't have to be 100% because you may be more of an introvert and want to keep to yourself a little bit, but do something so that you can help to grow yourself, help to have resources that will help you to be better mentally. So I love it. And I just feel for anybody out there that it doesn't feel like they have people to be able to share their life with and get feedback from.
Yeah, the power of unburdening is something that's really real. You don't realize it until you actually do it. Those examples that I gave where, we might ask our male friend, two questions and then move on versus, girls spending 40 minutes on the topic. Getting that out of your head is also one aspect of that, of if it stays in your head and you're the only one dealing with it, it's going to create anxiety. When you part of unburdening is actually processing, what happened on the date. So it's not just in your mind. You're actually processing. Okay, this happened. This was the type of vibe. then she asked this, like, processing is such an important part. One of the interesting things that people ask me all the time, especially as a young person in corporate life, how hard was it um, for you to admit publicly that you dealt with mental health issues? And certainly it was hard in the beginning. A lot of people discouraged me. They said it's not the right move for your corporate life or whatever. And, I think the good thing is I mean, not the good thing, but I had people that I had lost. So that, there was a level of, I don't really care about society's opinion because I've already lost people and it's affecting my life. But the real answer is my mental health has become so much better like in being open and who I am and saying I deal with mental health issues. It's lifted my brain and all that into, to a point where, if you compare where my mental health was in 2019 versus where I am today, it is incredibly different, in terms of the number of times a year that I think about suicide or things of that nature. Like un- unburdening myself unlocked, it was just admitting the truth, and it unlocked a level after that point. I guess, the way I would, maybe a better example is, you know, they talk about this with, any problem you have in life. The first point is you have to acknowledge it, right? And then you can move forward and make changes. And I think that is one aspect that for anyone out there dealing with stuff, like, you may think dealing with it alone is the best way, but you'll realize that unburdening your mind with those thoughts, whether it's, to a therapist or to a friend or, in a journal, however you process, that is, I mean, it's a big difference. And for those that haven't tried it, for those that have always dealt with things on their own, I encourage you to try it because you'll see such a big difference in your life.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think for me, I used to be embarrassed, you know. Um, I'm not. Then the more I talk about it, the more I feel like it's helping, and then again, this is not an overnight process. These are small, subtle changes. This is not going to be a quick fix, 24 hours. But the more you talk about it, the more you talk about it, the more you mention it, the more you tell your story. And I think we've all had we've had individuals on our podcast, who've told their stories. You know, um, as crazy as not crazy as the word, but as traumatic as they were. It's a way. The more you tell it or you speak it, the more it's the burden is being lifted off. So I just wanted to piggyback on what you were saying, Arnoff, is that it's not going to be an overnight fix, but the key aspect is again, um, start talking about it. I mean, just however you feel comfortable with.
Acknowledging reality for what it is always the right thing. You know, the way I look at it is, you not acknowledging what's actually true isn't going to help you. You're just hiding, you're not expressing it. That's all you're doing. Um, and not dealing with it is a way of dealing with it. It's the dumbest way to deal with it, because you're just burdening yourself. And like I said, for me, I'm in such a better place than I was 3 years ago. And a lot of that has just been not acknowledging who I am, embracing that, and just going forward with that, versus hiding and acting tough and acting strong and putting on a facade. And um, because reality is always reality, whether you choose to show it or not.
Yeah, yeah, and that's key. And um, I know that we could probably sit here and talk for hours. And I know it's Saturday and it's hot, but yeah, I think we could find a good stopping point because I know this is not going to be the first time we're going to have this conversation This is just the beginning. And I just want to say thank you to both of you guys. I'm blessed that God has blessed me to having you guys in my life, to be able to share my story with, to be able to have a conversation with. So I'm grateful and thankful for being able to be here today. Um, and we threw out some gauntlets today, and we threw out some hard truths, and I just really just want to challenge everybody to be real. And like I said, there's going to be more to come from Grateful Living podcast and Saturday morning coffee. And because, like I said, we want to see the difference in the world. And we're just three individuals, but, we're mighty and powerful individuals because we're telling real stories. And Tiffany, you have anything to say before we wrap up?
No, I'm just very thankful. I mean, this is it felt very real, and I think like Arnav was saying earlier too, I don't like living life and feeling like I'm putting on a mask or a facade to live through life, because then there's like this weird disconnect. It's almost like this, you're out here, but in reality, you're supposed to be over here. That's just how it feels to me. And so the more honest we can be with ourselves and share our stories it's that beginning of opening up that story and the healing, starting the healing that we all need, right? And I just to recap on that line that Lance was bringing up earlier, if anybody does need support and they need to reach out to somebody, if you're feeling like you're having suicidal thoughts, it is line 988. So please know that we're all thinking of you here. Arnav, Lance, myself, that we want the best for you, and that know that there are people that are here to talk to and be resources for you.
You're not alone.
Not alone.
We just proved that. I think we just proved that you're not alone.
100%.
Arnav, any closing words from Grateful Living podcast?
Yeah, I mean, on that point, I would just say, as someone that's dealt with suicidal ideations, the interesting thing there is a lot of that is not loving yourself. And I would encourage everyone out there listening or watching to really evaluate your relationship with yourself. How one of the things that I've challenged myself to do is in the morning to look in the mirror and say I love you. And that's really tough. It's a really bizarre thing for me to do. But what it does is it forces me to acknowledge my presence. It forces me to not distance myself and think of myself as nothing, and I think, you have to develop, and it'll take time, but you have to develop a relationship where you're your own best friend, and the way that you speak to yourself is the way you would speak to a best friend, right? So, if you get a bad grade in school, or you have a bad day, right? If Lance has a bad day, I'm not going to say to Lance, you suck, you are terrible, you're a piece of, um, you're nothing. I'm not going to continue to ridicule him, but Lance might do that to himself, right? If he has that way of if he has that day, but he would never do that to me, right? So why am I so much nicer to Lance or Lance is nicer to me than I am to myself? Ask that to yourself. If I have a bad day, why am I continuing to criticize myself and make it even worse, right? Um, so, support yourself the way you support a best friend. If you always treat them with kindness and you always are there for support, treat yourself the same way. Your life is worthy. You have a purpose here. Whatever voices or things that are in your head, whatever things or traumas that you've been through, I feel for you, but understand that you matter, uh, and you're meant to be here. You can make an impact. Pain is tough to deal with. A lot of people, I think, commit suicide because they don't want to deal with the pain more than it is about not wanting to live, right? And I acknowledge we all have our burdens. We all have been through things that affect us, but there's a way to deal with that pain. If you've been through a tough trauma, going to a therapist, and processing that, right? Try it out. It may not work, but it may work. It may help you, and a year from now, you'll be in a lot different place with how you deal with that pain mentally. So, I just want to say, like, I've been there. I've been close to acting. I know what it's like. But I can tell you it's not the right thing. You know, July of 2019, I was pretty close to acting. 3 years later, and not that this matters, but 3 years later, like, I'm in a much better place, right? And everybody thinks that I'm smart, that I have life figured out. I've had many different, great people on my podcast, whether it's, Brady Quinn or Kara Golden, who's the CEO of Hint Water, $150 million company, right? I'm still the same person that I was in 2019 about to take my life. There's nothing, I just worked on myself. And I use the tools of what society's given to create that transformation. I'm still that person that I was in 2019, but you can see that I've been able to transform that. And there are things that I couldn't see in 2019 where I could be mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, that I couldn't see myself in this position of being good, of not, dealing with suicidal thoughts every day of the week. There's just, you're not going to see it in that moment, but you have to believe in the power of transformation and the power of every day getting better.
Yeah.
And it can happen. And whatever success or whatever a happy life is for you, you can get there. You have to, it just takes belief, hope, and continue to love yourself. You'll get there.
Yeah. And that's exactly what I was going to say is Arnav and I, our conversation the other day, we talked about, and we'll wrap up is like, I just want to say, love yourself through the process. Love yourself through the process and you'll get there. And God has a plan for you. God has a plan for all of us. And if you're struggling with anything, our hearts go out to you. Again, but there is help, and this is proof of three individuals, three geographical areas, three different diversities, and we've had our struggles, but we've all learned to love ourselves through the process. And I hope that somebody takes something from this podcast and makes a difference in their life. And I just want to say thank you, Arnav, and Grateful Living Podcast for teaming up with Saturday Morning Coffee to have this not barbecue sauce conversation, but real life conversation. And we need to have more of them. And I'm looking forward to working. Tiffany and I are looking forward to working with you more in the future. And I just want to wish you a happy, hot Saturday. and go Boston.
Thank you guys for having me on.
Yes, thank you very much.